Welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I am your host, Matt. Another solo episode today. Trevor's actually traveling. He's going to be in my neck of the woods down in Southern California. So we might try to do an episode together live, but stay tuned for that. Today we're going to be talking about the Miami Dolphins, though. So Miami, they were a fun, cool team to watch last year, man. They finished 11-6, made it to the playoffs. Unfortunately, they faced KC in that like weird ice bowl game where it was like record temperatures. And I don't know if you guys followed the reports like in the months after, like people were like still not doing okay health wise, like in the fans. Like it was kind of a mess. And maybe next year if something like that happens, they'll move it to a dome, at a neutral location or who knows. But yeah, that was a tough one for them. And that team was not built to play in that sort of temperature coming from South Beach. But it is what it is. They march on, and in this offseason, they brought in OBJ, who I think at this point in his career, we probably know what his role is, and I wouldn't expect too much out of him. But looking at the draft, kind of an interesting draft. So they in the first round they took Chop Robinson out of Penn State, super high upside, pass rusher, kind of an athletic guy. That being a weak point in their game, that's something that they really focused on in both the draft as well as free agency too. So bringing in some new guys to help get after the quarterback. Looking at the skill position players, a couple guys I wanted to touch on was fourth rounder Jaylen Wright from Tennessee. So if you haven't seen our breakdown of the top five running backs heading into the NFL draft, he was a guy that we talked quite a bit about. And I don't know, man. From a real life perspective, if I was a Miami fan without any fantasy bias, I would be stoked with this pick. He's strong, he's fast, like fast, and he's just a really good player. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, he can pass block, like he can kind of do it all. And the fact that he was pushed into the fourth round has a lot to do with, how teams are valuing the running back position in the draft at this point. So I think that's a great pickup from them. So it'll be interesting to see, how that shakes out, and we'll kind of touch on him and the other guys in the fantasy component of the show. Um, but another guy, six rounder Malik Washington. So this guy, I think, is going to be a very good player for them, and I think by the end of the year, he is going to be their very solid number three wide receiver, which is something that they've kind of been looking for. I know they've kind of had a couple guys, and River Craycraft kind of sees the field quite a bit, kind of more of their number four, but he knows the McDaniel's playbook. But yeah, Malik Washington, super smart guy. I think he's going to pick up on the offense really quick. He had like almost no drops last year at Virginia, being the focal point of their offense. He actually had the highest forced missed tackle rate in college football. So he's tough to bring down. Shorter guy, but kind of that strong build slot receiver that, I don't think he's going to be relevant from a fantasy perspective because we've seen, how from the wide receiver position, it's going to run through one guy and, two guys really when they decide to actually throw to Waddle. But I think from a team perspective, I really like these picks. I really like what they did on the defensive line side of the ball. So hopefully they can, continue to improve. And like we said, with a lot of these teams in the AFC is just so tough. And it's one thing to get past KC in the playoffs, but it's another thing. It's, you got to play Buffalo, you got to play Baltimore, you got to play, a healthy Burrow in Cincinnati. So it's just going to be so fun to watch this entire year. And I can't wait. Looking at the fantasy component last year, Tua finished at QB9, which I kind of found surprising because I drafted Tua and I had him on all my teams. And for whatever reason, sorry, not all my teams, my kind of league of record team, it just felt like he wasn't as good as that. I feel like just because they ran the ball so much and it was always like one or two big plays to Tyreek, not a lot of rushing, obviously, but respectable finish given where he was drafted last year. Looking at the wide receiver position, Tyreek Hill finished at wide receiver too. Obviously CD kind of outpaced him at the end, but what an amazing year from Tyreek. It just felt like anytime you were watching a Miami game or every 10 minutes in red zone, he was just doing something incredible. And he was so fun to watch. And I love how he would like crouch down below the O line because he was just trying to disappear and then just shoot out of a cannon and then just take it to the house. So yeah, expect another big year from him. Waddle finished at number 34 on the season. He missed some time, but overall he was kind of a disappointment. And he was a guy that I also drafted to stack with Tua. Um, and I don't know, I just expected more out of him, but it wasn't like when he was on the field, he was bad. It was just run, 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 Tyreek bomb, run, Tyreek bomb. Like he just wasn't the focal point. And we saw when Tyreek missed time, he hit that like 60-yard touchdown where I think he burned Sauce Gardner. So he's caught game. They just signed him to an extension. So I'm super stoked on him being there because he's such a fun player to watch. Uh, as everyone expected, Raheem Mostert finished as the RB2 on the season. We all we all saw that coming. What a great year from him, man. Tip your cap because he stayed healthy all year and was just a baller. And then we saw Achane kind of burst onto the scene, especially in that game where they just manhandled Denver. And he finished at RB21, but wasn't on the field a whole lot. We'll kind of I guess kind of moving over to the fantasy, looking forward for this upcoming year, we'll stick with the running back position. Right now, Fantasy Pros has Achane at number 12, Mostert at number 26, and Jaylen Wright at number 55. To me, Achane is just too high in that position for me to draft. Like, I think it feels good when you pick him because you've seen the highlight tape and you've seen the upside, and it's going to be tough when you turn on the game and there's Mostert on the first drive, and then he gets a couple touches, Achane, and he's getting 8 touches again. It's just too high for my book. I understand that people in best ball pushing him up because you kind of just need one or two monster games here and there, or especially in the playoffs for that. But yeah, at 12, I'm just going to go in a different direction, which hurts me because I, took him with a very late round draft pick last year on, my home league team, as well as the best ball team where I ended up winning, the regular season championship. And it, I just can't do it at 12. I'm sorry. And Mostert at 26, like, I feel like, you're kind of setting yourself up to potentially be burned. But given what we saw out of him last year, like if you think he's going to stay healthy, then by all means take him there. Like I'll probably grab him a few times because if he has a top, even a top 10 season and you're just like, no, he's just going to get hurt, then, you're going to be SOL. So, we'll see how that kind of shakes out. But Jaylen Wright at 55, man, you don't want to predict injury, but if Achane and Mostert miss time, and if they miss time at the same time, this guy is going to be, you're going to hear it week 7 on whatever other fantasy show you listen to where they say, spend all your fab on Jaylen Wright, go after him, top priority list, blah, 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 blah. So if you're someone like me who drafts high upside situations and rookies with my last couple picks of the draft, this is probably someone that I'm going to target. And again, when you do that, you can't just say, oh, he got me 3 points the first 3 weeks, I'm going to cut him. You have to kind of treat him as this really high upside handcuff that can be a league winner. Like there's very few guys whose talent and situation could really truly make them a league winner. I know we hear that a lot, but think of, a couple years ago, with the Seattle running back situation where Kenneth Walker took over. Like this is the type of, maybe not quite that level of talent, but so if you're into kind of drafting for upside late, like at number 55, I'm going to take some shots, but just know, like, don't expect him to see your lineup for quite some time. And moving down to the wide receiver position, Tyreek Hill is listed as number 2. I think we'll see a pretty healthy debate throughout the summer of, whether it's CD or Tyreek. Kind of both sides of the coin are, CD's younger, less competition on the offense, maybe a little bit higher floor and consistent. Whereas Tyreek, he can win you a week any given week. I mean, he can go off for 30 plus points. We've seen it over and over again, but he's a year older, more weapons on the offense. Personally, I'm in the camp of CD, but I can see why people want to go Hill here, and Waddle, they've got him pushed up to number 19, and I think for me, just drafting him last year and kind of feeling a little bit burned by him, being high on him last year. He's someone that I'm going to avoid at 19 for the most part. Now, he's obviously a tremendous talent. He obviously has breakaway speed. We've seen what he can do, and it's, if that's your guy, then go for it. But I think 19 is just a little too rich for my blood, given, where he's going. But again, we don't want to just beat the injury drum, but if Tyreek misses time, then this guy's going to be a top 8, 9 receiver. So just keep that in mind too. And looking at Tua, Fantasy Pros has him at QB 12. I think with the quarterback position being so deep this year, I mean, rounds 12 through 20 feel kind of similar in a lot of ways. Like you can make the case for, I mean, if you want to make the case for Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins over Tua, you probably could. I mean, that would be a stretch. But looking at these guys in a super flex format, I'm not going to draft Tua as the QB 12. I've always kind of had beef with Tua ever since he was on my fantasy team last year. I don't know. I mean, I was cheering for him when he took over, in the national championship game and won that game. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just gonna wait and take, a Cousins or Deshaun Watson as my second quarterback. But if he's your guy and maybe you want to stack, we'll see. He's dropped a few pounds this year. I know that's kind of been, the talk of the town. Maybe he gets some of that mobility back. He's never been like a super mobile quarterback, but coming out of high school, he was listed as a dual threat. He did run a little bit of Bama. I don't really foresee that happening. But if he gets a little bit more mobility and this offense should be fantastic, go ahead and take him. So with that, that is the Miami Dolphins, and we will see you guys here soon.